As General Baker looks around his command bridge on board the flagship Prometheus, he begins to think back on how this oh-so-long journey began a few years ago. If he could jump back in time and give his previous self a piece of advice, it would be, over the next 8 years you will come to truly know the definition of the word sacrifice, and you will experience so much loss, but it is completely worth it in the end. An alarm starts going off by the radar station, which brings his attention back to the task at hand. From across the bridge, the radar operator speaks up. "Sir, the Queen's carrier has just entered the system." 8 years prior. Jets of steam erupt from Commander Higgins's nose as he steps out into the cold morning air. The nightly blizzards have been getting colder over the weeks leading up to this day, possibly just a feeling of getting caught. As he scans over the surrounding area of the dry lake bed, he sees a rising dust trail approaching fast. "Sarah, identify the approaching vehicle." Commander Higgins asks the AI linked to his headset from their battle carrier hidden in the underground bunker below him. "Sir, the approaching vehicle belongs to Governor Swift. 1 person on board. No other vehicles detected." Reports the AI. Commander Higgins reaches down and unlatches the lock on his standard issue officer's laser pistol, takes the safety off, and waits to identify the driver. After a few minutes, Sarah reports driver identified as Tom Bone, our informant. "Thank you, Sarah. Please inform the General we will be ready to go in a few minutes." "Yes, Commander." A few minutes later, the planet governor's custom armor-plated limo comes to a screeching halt in front of him. In a hurry, Tom jumps out of the limo. Nearly falling asleep he does. "Sir, we've got to launch soon. I overheard Smith talking to High General Vandalar, saying he knows of the plot to steal the Prometheus." "Did you hear anything Vandalar said?" "No, sir. They were speaking by phone. All I heard was Smith saying, 'I'll see you tomorrow, and bring the Hades.'" "Sarah, tell the General." Before he could finish, Sarah cuts him off. "Already ahead of you, sir. Stand by." A few seconds pass before she speaks again. "The General wants the limo on board. Copy that, Bone?" "Roger. Open the cargo doors," Bone orders Sarah. Off to the side of the staircase building, Higgins, originally emerged from 2 big doors, slide open to reveal an elevator that descends into the underground hangar. Bone rolls the limo onto the elevator and is quickly lowered below the surface. Higgins scans the area around the dry lake bed and the surrounding mountains before heading back inside. "Commander, General Baker wants you to verify everything is loaded and all external hatches are sealed," Sarah informs Commander Higgins. "Roger, Sarah. Inform Ensign Parks she's got 5 minutes to secure everything." As Higgins runs down the staircase, the Prometheus finally comes into view. The extra-long rectangle body of the ship sits on the hangar floor, even though it is equipped with landing struts. Out of the top, the squat neck supports the main bridge. On the sides, the 3 large hangars dominate a lot of the ship. On the bridge, General Baker is giving commands to the bridge crew in preparation to depart. "Captain Terrock, start the main engines and engage the artificial gravity generators," orders the General. As Terrock starts pressing buttons on his pilot station, everyone's stomach turns upside down for a second as the artificial gravity kicks on and fights for dominance over the gravity of the planet. Ensign Fuller set the radar out to 100 miles. Sarah orders battle stations. "Lieutenant Mahana, charge forward and aft rail guns. Wait till we are clear the dock before extending barrels." Everyone gets to work on their assigned tasks. Down in the engine bay, Lieutenant Grant, the Chief of Engineering, is barking orders trying to get the primary engines warmed up. "Throw the primary and secondary safety switches, increase the antiproton output, and get those relays connected." As she is calling out the orders, her crew is busy running around getting the main drive core up and going. In the core, the antiproton collider is starting to speed up till it starts slamming protons together at such speeds the rate of energy needed to power the massive engines slowly raises to 100%. Once everything is up and running smoothly, the generators for the engines kick on, awaiting the main control switch on the bridge to activate. Over her comm headset, Commander Higgins, "Engines up to par, ready when you are." Through the speaker, "Roger that, Grant. Need you to stay there, this may be a bumpy ride." "Copy that, sir." The last of the supply vehicles is loaded up and final checks are made. Commander Higgins makes his way up to the command bridge, but is stopped along the way by Captain Lange. "What is it, Lange?" "I overheard that the Hades may be coming. Want me to get my squadron ready?" "Yes, alert 2nd and 3rd squadrons to be ready as well." With a quick salute, Lange takes off down the corridor on his way to Launch Bay 1. A few minutes later, Commander Higgins emerges from the rear elevator onto the bridge. As he approaches the center of the room, he greeted the general and proceeded to sit in the executive officer's chair, allowing the general to stay in his seat. "Sir, all doors secured, all systems ready, awaiting your orders," Captain Terrock reports. "Fuller, anything on radar?" asked General Baker. "No, sir, everything is clear," she replies. "Well, Commander Higgins, are you ready?" "Yes, let's get the hell off this rock," Higgins responds. "Sir, battle stations are manned, and civilians are secured in their quarters," Sarah pipes in. "Copy, Sarah." "Okay, Terrock, take us out." As Terrock hits several switches, the massive doors over the Prometheus slowly begin to open, allowing dirt to fall into the hangar along with the sunlight. Once the hangar door is completely open, the anti-gravity lifters start pushing the massive weight of the ship up through the opening. In the bridge, Terrock is furiously punching in commands to his console, keeping everything going smoothly. Out of nowhere, the sun blasts its light through the bridge windows, which the automated tinting glass immediately darkens. "Clear of the hangar," reports Terrock. "Take us to course 145 degrees and prepare for planetary escape burn." The massive ship begins to swing to the right, heading towards the South Mountain Range. "Sir, radar contact bearing 295 degrees, yells Fuller. "Identify." Before anyone can react, a voice communication is picked up on the comm station. "Sir, we are being hailed. It's High General Vandalar," says Ensign Anderson. The simple fact that it is Vandalar means the approaching ship is the Hades, the galaxy's first supercarrier. Although many others have been built ever since Hades proved itself in the First Colony Wars, it is still the most feared. "Patch it through." On bridge windows, a screen opens revealing a man whose face has been scarred in several battles. His one good eye stares into the souls of everyone it glances at. "Well, retired High General Baker and Commander Higgins, I thought that might have been you. Where are you going with that ship? I hope you are not leaving us behind, are you?" Vandalar states, his deep voice booming through the speakers. "General Vandalar, oh no, you've got it all wrong. We are just taking her for a spin, testing out her prototype engines," replies General Baker. "I thought you were still on Royal Prime. How's everything?" Before he could finish, Vandalar cuts him off. "Cut the crap, Baker. I know of the plot to defect. Land that vessel and surrender yourself for a royal court-martial." "I'm afraid I can't do that, Vandalar. You see, I'm taking this vessel and going somewhere you can't follow." With that, he gives the comm officer the kill sign. The visuals disappear. Terrock change pitch to 45 degrees and engage planetary burn. The Prometheus angles up right as a plasma round flies past the bridge view screens. "Sir, they have opened fire," reports Mahana. "Terrock now." Terrock hits the launch button and immediately the ship's engines kick into overdrive. Huge jets of fire-up shoot out the back of the ship, rocketing it up through the atmosphere. "So it has begun," General Baker thinks out loud. Shields down to 75%. Aft rail guns are down. Engine power down to 19%. "We are running off of thrusters at this point," reports Sarah. The Prometheus has been doing everything it can to escape the clutches of the Hades. The turret crews have been doing a good job destroying wave after wave of General Vandalar's Immortals, a fleet of small attack fighters strategically launched to appear as if there will be no end of them. Commander Higgins turns to General Baker. "Baker, I think it's about time we surrender. We have been fighting for the last 14 hours straight and so far." He stops himself mid-sentence as the Baker turns and glares at him. He has been with his friend for years and knows that the look he just shot him was one he has seen many times. Knowing exactly what he is thinking, Higgins can only say, "Yes, sir." Years before, when the general had taken Higgins under his wing, he learned very quickly that the general always had a plan B, C, and D under his belt for every situation. Every time things looked grim and Higgins questioned him, he always got the same look. One of, "Why do you question my judgment? I've seen more combat than you can imagine, so unless I ask you in private, don't question in public." "Terrock, flip around, put our nose right at Hades," Baker orders. Once the Prometheus is facing the Hades, reverse thrusters. Turning his attention, Mahana, fire forward rail guns. 2 bright slug rounds emerge from the front of Prometheus. The depleted uranium rounds scorch through empty space, evaporating the small fighters dumb enough to stay in their way. The first one misses by meters, but the second slams right into the starboard recovery ramp on the Hades, blowing a huge melted hole right through it. Immediately, the plasma cannons return fire with their own. Huge glowing globs of superheated material come screaming at the Prometheus bridge. All miss but one, which hits the pylon connecting the bridge to the main fuselage. Immediately, the protective exterior metal starts to melt off. Over the comm systems, "Baker, isn't it about time you give up? Just like how you gave up on Nibiru all those years ago." Vandalar's voice emitted from the speakers in a mocking voice. Baker knows he is trying to get under his skin, and it's working. "Mahana, how accurate can you be with the rail guns?" "I'm decent, Terrock. You think you can follow my lead?" Mahana replies. Terrock just nods at Mahana. "What's your plan, sir?" "I want you to target the port side engine, 25 yards in front of it to the left a little. Do you see that panel that doesn't look a little discolored? Target that spot." "Roger, Terrock. I'm sending you a display of system sightings. Aim us in that general area." To his headset, "Lange, are you ready?" "Yes, sir. Just give the word." Lange responds, "I want you to load a M2 warhead and stand by for your attack plan." Changing his attention to his AI, Sarah, send him tactical plan 38M. "Roger," both respond. Mahana, wait for Lange to launch and then fire. Wave after wave of plasma volleys come screaming at the Prometheus, but most are stopped short by the shields or completely missed. The Hades is doing everything it can to keep the Prometheus from escaping. A couple minutes go by, then first squadron comes flying out of the launch bays like a swarm of bees escaping from a hive. Seconds later, the large rail guns in the bow open fire. Both rounds go screaming through the gap between the two ships so fast that Hades has no time to react. The first round hits the target hard and destroys the surrounding area. The second one misses the target but makes an even bigger mark as it completely bypasses the panel but slams into the back of the port side engine, blowing it completely off and melting the surrounding armor. Instantly, Hades starts to swing around, obviously a crippling blow. But Baker knows full well it's far from out of the fight. Almost instantly, Vandalar's voice comes piping through again. "Ha ha ha, you think that's going to stop me? I've fixed that little error since the last time you commanded her." "Yes, but I still have a trick up my sleeve." Switching over to ship comms, Lange. "Now." While Vandalar was more focused on the Prometheus, he had completely forgotten about the fighters now attacking his ship. Lange had been able to sneak through the sensor hole the rail guns just opened. What Vandalar doesn't realize is that where the uranium hit wasn't just the spot where the primary life support system used to be, but where the relays for the port side sensors run through. Lange lines up his M2 tactical nuke missile to the main bridge pylon and lets it fly. The missile goes flying straight at it and detonates just feet away. Due to the vacuum of space, the explosion is not nearly as powerful as it could be, but it's strong enough to blow a huge hole into the neck of Hades. Debris and bits of what used to be people come flying out into space like a ruptured artery. As the Hades bleeds out, it veers back toward Orion 5, the planet they had escaped from, retreating from battle. Immediately, what's left of the first squadron returns to Prometheus. Badly beaten Prometheus begins to proceed on its original course. getting as much distance between them and Vandalar. Inside the Hades bridge, High General Vandalar stares out the viewscreen at the retreating Prometheus. "You have defeated me this time, my old commander, but I will find you, and next time I will kill you and every defector on that ship." "Sir, we've been sitting here for days now. I think it's time we get moving," Commander Higgins protests to his friend. "We have picked up the Hades as well as a few other cruisers on the sensor buoys we dropped a couple sectors back. Grant has gotten almost everything fixed. Her repair teams are still getting the aft port side rail gun back to operation. It took a direct plasma hit." "How long till it's operational?" General Baker asks. "Grant estimates it should be fixed in a few hours." "Good. Now how long have you been under my command?" "Many years. Now, you are no longer my commander. We have defected, effectively cutting any chain of command. Now for..." Before Higgins could finish his rant, Baker had walked over and with a swift punch to gut knocked the bigger man to the deck. In a very calm voice he says, "Now that you're able to shut up and listen, you have been my second in command for so long because I allowed you to. Under anyone else you would have been demoted a long time ago. Your heart is in the right place for this, but you let it get the best of you. Now I do have a reason for keeping us here. Do you remember our assault on Argos 2? Still shaking off the sucker punch? Why, yeah, what about it? I've been in contact with some of their civilian leaders. They have sent a ship to meet us here." Sir? You do remember they beat the tar out of us?" "Yes, that's why I've been in contact with them. They have a group that wants to explore and aid us. For them helping us and tagging along, all they want in return is to study what we can bring them." "Okay. When are they supposed to get here?" "Well, they are supposed to be here in a few hours." "Sir, Ensign Anderson would like you to come to his robotics lab. Said he has some new tech for you," Sarah pipes through the ship's internal communications. "Tell him I'll be down in a few minutes," responds Baker. Turning his attention back to Higgins, "Are we good, or do you need more details? How do we know they won't just attack us, or that they don't just want to steal our ship for themselves? I trust them. Anything else?" Higgins thinks for a minute before answering, "No, sir, I'm good." "Okay, take over command while I go check on what Anderson's working on." Down in his robotics lab, Ensign Chris Anderson has been steadily working on new ideas. His latest build is a full robotic armor-plated suit for troops to wear. The designs had been stolen from some planet he couldn't remember the name of, right before it was destroyed. He had originally built it in a few weeks' time, but was never satisfied with how it turned out, so he kept modifying it over and over again. "You know, Anderson, you sir are a genius," he says to himself. "The latest upgrade may be what puts it to its limits." "What is it, Anderson?" Baker asks as he walks in. "Oh, sir, I'm finally done with my Titan project," Anderson responds. "Finally got the AI to be able to adapt to the user." "Okay, so what can it do?" "Just about anything you need someone to do. I've been using the prototype to help me move some heavy material around for starters. The hand pieces can do everything a normal hand does. But the best thing is it has its own life support system and is able to keep someone alive in space for up to 36 hours. How exactly did you test that one out?" "Well, I kinda tested it on myself." Shaking his head at Anderson, risking his own life for that. "You know you could have tested it on a mouse or some other rodent, right?" "Well, yeah, but..." "Sorry, sir. I do have a favor to ask, though." What is it?" "I've got 2 Titans operational. Can we assign a couple of people to take them for a trial period and see what they can do?" After a minute or two to think, Baker finally nods his approval. "Who do you have in mind?" "Well, I was thinking Sergeant Nolan Higgins and Sergeant Rooster Madison." "So you want our Marines' best recon scout and our best sniper?" "Well, if the AI can adapt the suit to fit their skills, it will make them better solders. And having those 2 tested out will prove that the AI can be adapted to fit a wide range of functions." "Okay," reaching up to press the comms button on his headset. "Sarah, send Sergeant Madison and Sergeant Higgins down here." A few minutes later, two men come sprinting through the door into Anderson's lab, simultaneously snapping to attention and announcing, "Reporting as ordered, sir," while heavily breathing. "At ease, gentlemen. You both have been chosen to help Anderson test out his Titans. Just follow his lead and keep him updated on the suits. Now I'm not ordering you to do it, it is your choice." "What's the risk to us, sir?" Nolan asks. "Well, there is a chance something could break or malfunction and kill you," Anderson tells them. "So, there is a chance I can get a scar, and I can potentially take the long nap. Sounds like fun to me, I'm down." Rooster says, confident as always. "Sounds simple enough," says Nolan. "Okay, you're in charge, Anderson," Baker tells him, and with that he leaves, shaking his head and muttering under his breath. Marine's next stop, to check on Grant and her team in engineering. "Okay, I need you two to strip down and put on these sensor suits." Anderson holds up a pair of black spandex-looking suits with sensor plugs all over them. Down on the engineering deck, Baker is walking around double-checking everything is in running order. As he passes by the core, he stops to stare into it. The swirling blues and reds coming together in a natural spiral that never seems to touch grabs his attention and drags him somewhere else. Many years ago, while on a mission to conquer Betelgeuse 2, a young Sergeant Baker had been assigned to defend the left flank of his commander's advancing forces. Several times he had seen several vehicles charging his light mech suit, trying to break through his defensive lines. Each had been dispatched the same way with a quick burst fire from his Gatling cannon. If they got past that, then he would launch grenades in an explosive rain. On one particular wave, an armored car had managed to get close enough for the driver, a young woman, to bail out and take a quick shot before Baker's training kicked in. He shot her in the chest with his mech's gun. Seconds later, his mind snapped back to what he had just done. Before that moment, his targets had only been vehicles. He never allowed himself to believe that there were people inside them. But with this woman lying in a pool of her own blood and a hole through what was left of her chest, he knew what he had done, knew that. "Sir, are you okay?" Grant asks him. Her presence had been unknown to him till that point. "Yes, I'm fine," he says while shaking the image out of his head. "Systems back to 100%. All weapons back to normal." "Thank you," he responds, knowing full well she wouldn't understand the double meaning. "When you get some downtime, I've got a favor I need from you. I want you to think of some improvements to our equipment, or something we could build that can be used to improve ourselves or our standing. Any ideas are welcome." "Well, sir, I do have an idea for that limo that was brought on board a little while ago. I keep seeing it downstairs and think I can do something with it. Give me the details in a report, and I'll review it." He is cut off by Sarah blasting in his ear. "Sir, report to the bridge. Unknown vessel coming into range," Sarah announces. With a quick burst of speed that he will be hurting from later, Baker sprints to the elevator and is gone. Grant, seeing this, immediately orders her team to battle stations. A minute later, Baker comes running out of the elevator onto the bridge. Commander Higgins is talking to a comm window on the view screen to a woman obviously furious at something. "Ma'am, we have no conflict with you. Please proceed." Ignoring Commander Higgins completely, she turns her attention to Baker. "Well, hello there, Andrew. Who's the Chihuahua?" "Well, Miss Alana, that would be my second in command, Commander Levy Higgins." Noticing on the sensor screen that Alana's ship has its weapons armed. "Want to power down your weapons there?" "Oh yeah, sorry about that. Your dog refused to inform me on your whereabouts." The red from her face starting to fade away. "So, where are we heading to?" "We are heading for Honduras 4. Got an old friend there waiting for us." "Honduras 4? Isn't that the Kingdom of the Rose?" "It is." Alana lets out a small laugh. "Sounds good, but before we head out, I've got a surprise for you." "Alana, you know I hate surprises." "Oh, shut up. So my government has granted me permission to merge our ships." "What do you mean merge?" "You remember how your forces couldn't beat us because our ships have those nanobots for armor plating that just kept healing after every hit? Well, they do much more than that. Please tell your crew to stand still. With that, she cuts communications. From the view screen, Alana's ship starts to move toward the Prometheus, its large wings looking like huge spires emerging from a fiercely angled, elongated-looking fuselage, their bridge forming the rounded front of their ship, unlike the Prometheus and its spire-mounted bridge. As it gets closer, it begins to descend below the Prometheus and turn 180 degrees. Once positioned below the Prometheus, a hole big enough for the bottom of Prometheus to sit in slides into itself. Then slowly the two ships connect with the battle bridge of Alana's ship, becoming the front of Prometheus. Large clamps from the lower ship clamp down onto the lower outer hull of the upper one, holding it in place. Huge wire-looking tubes begin growing and probing over the hulls, and like a worm to an apple start burrowing in. Millions upon millions of self-replication nanobots flood through each compartment, filling in cracks and fixing damage as they go along. All the while using scrap pieces of metal they find to replicate more of themselves. As the wave washes over everything, they seem to leave organic material alone, but proceed to eat and replicate all the metal, changing everything solid into a sheet of interlocking advanced nanobots. Sir, we are getting reports from all over the ship that systems are shutting down, reports Sarah. The other vessel appears to be B. She stops talking fluidly, and the voice changes from very human-like to a mix of human and robotic. She then starts screaming. They are eating my core. IHHHTA. Her screams so loud on the internal speaker that everyone on the bridge was forced to cover their ears. After a minute, the speakers short out and all went quiet. As the bridge crew try to shake the ringing from their ears, the power in the bridge cuts off, leaving everyone in the dark with no gravity. Remembering the massive fleet that had surrounded Argos, 2 Higgins finally figured out how their ships were so large. They ate the enemy's ships and turned the part into their own. Sir, Higgins turns to where Baker now floats. I told you this might happen. How long had the lights been out? A minute, 10 minutes. Thinking to himself, General Baker wondered if his second-in-command had been correct. Had he been wrong? Had he actually made a mistake in trusting someone? A green light starts flashing on and off on the navigator station. Within seconds of noticing it, the gravity kicks back on, and then the lights. Systems report, asks Higgins to his bridge crew. Sir, if I'm reading this right, my station is working at 150% optimum, reports Terrorized. Mine too, from the navigator. Throughout the bridge, every station did a complete systems check and found they were operating above optimum levels. Sarah, what's your status? Baker asks his AI. There is no response from her. Sarah, answer me. Still nothing. Side glancing at Higgins, he says to himself just one word. With their main AI assistant down, all orders from the bridge had to be hand-delivered. Their ship-to-ship comms worked, yes, but internal comms use was blocked by the magnetic wave the core produced. That's why Sarah had to relay all the orders. Sir, what the hell just happened? Lieutenant Grant's voice booming through the speakers. I don't know if you noticed, but everything on this ship has been messed with, including the comms. Obviously shocked that the intership comms are now allowing individuals to talk through it. What's the condition of the engine bay? Sir, I don't know how to put it, but whatever just happened, I can no longer be your chief mechanic. This whole place has changed. Only thing that hasn't is the core. However, it's 3 times the size it used to be. So like your new ship? Alana asks as the elevator doors open. She takes a step out, and a mountain of a man comes walking out behind her. With her standing at only 5 foot 5 inches, her small stature makes the man behind her seem like a giant. Coming in at around 6 foot 8 inches, the man walks up and introduces himself. Colonel John Payne Jr., shaking first Baker's hand, then Higgins. You must be the infamous renegades, holding his hands up and bending his fingers as he says it. News has already been sent across the galactic news radio broadcast networks about you. However, the news did say all of you were mass murders. No, that's not exactly true. Baker responds, only some of us. The stupid joke makes its point and the group laughs a little. turning his attention to Alana. "So what did you do to my ship?" "Isn't it obvious? Our ships merged, becoming one ship. Granted, your ship was in a sense eaten and reproduced into nanobots, but that just made it so our ships can combine better." "What happened to my AI?" Higgins asks. "You mean that old Sarah unit? Wasn't that more of an electronic assistant than an actual AI?" "Yes, but she still controlled most of the basic functions on the ship," he retorts. "Well, Chihuahua, she has been replaced. Her upgrade is still in progress. In the meantime," turning back to Baker, "we still need to discuss our new arrangement. Shall we step into your briefing room?" Leading the way to the elevator, Higgins stops Alana. "Why do you call me Chihuahua?" he asks her. "I'll tell you later." With that, she turns and leaves. After a half hour, the group of commanders emerges from the brief room. Immediately, they are greeted by a familiar voice. "Good afternoon, sir. My systems report ship is now operating at optimum efficiency," Sarah says. "Sarah, I see you're back. Everything in your programming good?" Baker asks. "Sir, your basic Sarah unit has been dispersed. My name is Violet. I have fully replaced the Sarah unit. She was underperforming anyways. I am the best true artificial intelligence you can find. All of Sarah's duties have been uploaded to me as well as all information she had. I hope to impress you in the future." "Well, that's different." Higgins mumbles to nobody in particular. Changing the subject, Alana turns to Baker. "With your leave, sir, I've got more tests to perform on the surrounding area." With a quick nod, he dismisses her. She would be third in command of the now upgraded Prometheus, Baker in the lead, followed by Higgins. After Alana and John head back to their part of the ship, Baker turns his attention back to Higgins. "Want to let your brother stretch his legs?" "Where are you sending him?" "Honduras 4. Gonna send him to meet up with King Rose." "You're sending Nolan as a diplomat? To the King of Thorns world?" "Not as a diplomat, as a messenger." Without waiting for Higgins' response, Baker reaches up and presses the comms button on his headset. "Sergeant Higgins, report to the bridge." A few minutes later, the door to the main elevator opened, and what emerged was so large that Baker had thought that some experiment had happened that combined 4 men together into one huge colossus. The person wore a form of combat armor that covered his or her entire body. Baker could not tell who was inside. The form moved to emerge from the elevator and surprised Baker by how quiet it stepped. A man that size and armor would normally have a solid thud sound, but not this thing. Its steps were very quiet, so quiet that before Higgins even turned to look, he just yells to his brother, or what he thought was his brother, "Nolan, up here." By this time, Baker had stood up to prepare for this thing. It had stepped toward him. It then stopped and snaps to attention, its right arm rising up and giving Baker what he thought was a salute. "Sergeant Higgins reporting as ordered," the beast announces, his voice coming through a speaker built into the suit. A second later, the helmet slides back into itself and slides back into the suit, leaving his head open. Hearing his brother's voice in a weird tone, Higgins just now turns to look at his younger brother, and immediately jumps up as he cusses, "Specking hell." Baker chuckles a bit. "Yeah, he freaked me out too," turning back to the younger Higgins. "Let me guess, Anderson's Titan?" "No, sir. I am the property of Sergeant Nolan Higgins," says a new voice from the speakers, sounding like a young man with a hint of artificial. "Sorry, sir. That would be the AI in the suit. Still haven't given it a name yet," Nolan says. "Well, you'll have plenty of time to come up with a name. I'm sending you to Honduras 4. I want you to report to King Rose and inform them of our arrival. He will be expecting you. Take one of the messenger shuttles and we will meet you there." "Yes, sir." With a quick salute, the helmet closes around his head again, and he turns back toward the elevator. "Now how in the hell was that suit so quiet?" Baker says to himself, making a mental note to ask Anderson the next time he see him. A few minutes later, and the small shuttle Nolan had taken flies out of the launch bay and sends a message to his brother. "Dude, Prometheus looks like a badass now. You should take a look for yourself. See you in a few days. With that, Nolan powers up the sub-light engines and blasts himself to 2/3 light speed and is gone. Unmarked shuttle, identify yourself. A man's voice booming through the comm speakers. Sergeant Higgins had come into the Honduras system only a few hours ago. Upon arriving at the 4th planet in the solar system, he was greeted with gunfire. Just a warning shot, but more than enough to get his attention. This is Sergeant Nolan Higgins, a messenger of General Andrew Baker. He waited a moment to see if he was going to be blown out of the air or allowed to land. After a full minute, he spoke up again. I was ordered to come here and meet with King Rose, was told he was expecting. He was cut off. You will be escorted to Hangar Bay 23. If you attempt to flee, you will be destroyed. Follow the marshaller in front of you. Just then, a man wearing some sort of jetpack with wings flies right in front of him. Holding an orange glow wand in each hand, the man directs Higgins to follow, and then start lowering to the ground. Once he feels the struts touch solid ground, Nolan turns off the shuttle and opens the rear hatch. Before leaving, he climbs into his Titan suit. Not knowing what to expect, it's a good chance to survive. He had been forced to climb out when he first got into the shuttle. The Titan's size is too big for the small cockpit and impossible to sit at the pilot's chair, even if he had managed to get it in. Checking over his items, he decided to leave his weapons behind. Stepping off in the Titan is one thing, bringing weapons was quite another. As he steps out, he is greeted by a squad of armed men, who charge their weapons and point them at him. Nolan immediately stops and raises his armored hands. I am unarmed, changing from exterior speakers to internal comms, and speaking to his AI Dean, lower my helmet. His helmet retracts, exposing his head. The men did not retract their weapons, they didn't even move. Just stood there like stone soldiers. Nolan went to drop his arms when he saw one man start to aim for his head. Deciding that lowering his arms would be a bad idea, he locked his armor in that position to keep him from wasting his own energy trying to keep his hands up. From the far wall of the hangar bay, a door opens, and a man in what looked like armor made of an old Egyptian type from the days of Earth, except it looked way too modern, walks out. His forearms, calves, stomach, and head were completely exposed, but what caught Nolan's attention most was the man looked rather tall and had mechanical wings on his back. It looked like the marshaller's jetpack, but a complete armored version of it. As the man crosses the hangar, he yells out commands to the men holding Nolan at gunpoint. At ease, the men drop their weapons and stand erect. As the man approaches, Nolan releases the lock on his armor and lets his hands drop. I am Sergeant Nolan Higg. He is cut off again. I know who you are, Sergeant. I was ordered to bring you before King Rose. As the man looks over his armor, you might want to leave your suit here. It's too big for where we are going. Take no offense, but I'd rather not go someplace without me being able to protect myself. Very well, grab your sidearm, but leave the suit behind. The man turns back to his men. Dismissed. Return to the barracks. As Nolan watches, each man spreads out from each other. The backpacks they wore, which he had not noticed till just now, open up and mechanical wings unfold from them. Then what he could only believe is a jet emerges, and the men take off through the air and disappear from sight over the top of the hangar bay. Still gaping at what he had just saw, he turns his wide eyes back to the man still standing there. With a smirk on his face, he waves his hand at Nolan as if he was impatiently waiting for him. Nolan re-enters his shuttle, climbs out of his Titan, and grabs his sidearm, a simple 9mm handgun. Sir, what do you want me to do while you're away? Dean asks him through the external speakers. Lock up shop. We are here as messengers, not scouts. However, if you get the chance, see if you can tap into the shuttle's sensors and upload a detailed map of the area. With that, he turns and leaves the shuttle, closing the ramp behind him. Upon leaving, Nolan notices his escort has already crossed the hangar and was waiting by an open door. Running over to him, he yells out, "So who are you?" The man replays, "My name is Nathan Knight. I'm King Rose's captain of the guard." With that, he turns and leads Nolan to his king. Billions of miles away, Commander Higgins is in a small shuttle examining his new modified ship. His little brother had been right. The Prometheus had changed, and with all the new tech on board, it did look a lot meaner. The Royal Guard ships were usually very basic, no imagination to their designs. The Prometheus was just a blocky ship with sharp angles and plain exterior. After the Argonaut, Higgins had just learned the name of Alana's ship, had merged with Prometheus. A lot had changed. For one, the Prometheus was now a full 1,000 meters longer than it had been before. The hangar bays had been made bigger, large enough for 2 full squads of fighters per bay. In the midsection, a completely new bulk lay around the ship. Higgins had heard that the new section was a drop pod launch bay. The turrets that used to cover most of the exterior were now on retractable platforms, all of which were retracted under the hull. The biggest changes were that the fuselage was now more of a diamond round shape than of the square box. The engines had gotten a hardcore upgrade. Each had increased in size by twice. Just behind the bridge were 4 brand new wings that each were armed with what Alana had called a proton cannon. Apparently, it was far more powerful than the standard laser cannons, but not nearly as tough as a torpedo. On the back side of the engine bay, 2 large engines poked out from a box attached to the sides. Apparently, they were remote-controlled battle drones. The drones themselves were 10 meters wide, tall, and long. Each had a full complement of torpedoes as well as laser cannons. Higgins had never even considered something like this before. As he makes another pass around Prometheus, Alana interrupts his thoughts. "Are you still out there, Chihuahua?" Her voice becoming most irritating to him. "You've made 4 passes so far. Everything is in working order, let's get a move on." Just to keep her from talking some more, he cut off the comms. "I'm really starting to hate that woman," he says to himself. As he returns to the hangar bay, he gets a comms message. This time it's from General Baker. "Higgins, get that shuttle on board now. The Hades was just picked up on long-range sensors." With that, the comm window shuts off. He did not need to hear more. With a few quick thruster adjustments, the shuttle touches down on the hangar bay floor. The doors of the bay slam shut, and air is pumped into the bay, making a pressurized atmosphere. Higgins quickly unhooks his harness and bolts out the shuttle, running for the closest elevator. As he boards the elevator, he can feel the massive engines powering up. Within seconds, the Prometheus is now moving as fast as it can go, trying once again to avoid the Hades. On the bridge of the Hades, High General Vandalar stands as confident as always. His radar operator announces they have just spotted the Prometheus. Once again, rage and malice fill his face. "Battle station, full speed." As he glares into his view screen in the front of the bridge, "Order the fleet to attack on sight," he tells his captain. 6.1. Levy Higgins had no idea what had happened to his life. One minute he was playing football for his high school team. The next, he had been drafted by the Royal Guard's Mandatory Service Act. His father had pulled some string and bribed some officials to make sure that he would go to the military academy. Levy would be an officer in the Royal Space Navy, not some ground-pounding Marine grunt. 3 years after this, he had been called to active duty, and his younger brother, Nolan, had been drafted as well. Their father had passed away sometime over the last couple years, and Nolan did not get the same luxury as his older brother. The first battle the brothers had been in was during the same assault. However, one was in space, the other on the ground. Levy had been assigned as one of the RGS Hector's random ensigns, and Nolan was a corporal in the Marines. The RGS Hector was an old colony ship refitted into a dropship carrier. As Levy watched from the hangar control room, he saw his little brother gear up and load onto a dropship. Moments later, his dropship launched. Not knowing if he was ever going to see his brother again, Levy did the one thing he thought he could do to help. He ran to the old orbital planetary observation platform, a section on the bottom of the ship once used for exploring a planet from space. During the battle, Levy continuously fed information to his brother, keeping his brother and his unit in a spot where they could strategically wipe out their enemy and stay as safe as possible. This caused Nolan's unit to have the highest confirmed kill-to-casualty ratio in his entire company's history, and earning them all the honorary title of elite. Once details were reported, and it was made clear that Ensign Higgins had commanded a Marine unit, he got a promotion to lieutenant. This also started a new type of tactic. The eye in the sky method was adopted. Following Lieutenant Higgins' lead, all ground battles started being commanded from space. After several successful invasions, Levy's tactic became the #1 reason why all the world's the Royal Guard came to eventually bend the knee. What started as a way to protect his brother became the galaxy's biggest tool for destruction. This tore at Levy's heart for many, many years. With the explosions going off around the Prometheus, Commander Higgins wondered where his brother was at now. The small fleet, following the orders of High General Vandalar, were pounding the Prometheus as it attempted to escape. So far the Prometheus had managed to stay out of each trap Vandalar threw at them by dodging through an asteroid field, but that had only slowed them down as well as Vandalar's fleet. During a wave of fighters, Prometheus had dodged around a planet-sized asteroid and deployed its battle drones that surprisingly enough were extremely effective against the small fighters. Combine those with the point defense turrets and the ship's own fighters, and every enemy fighter that got close was practically vaporized. "Sir, I have an idea," says Alana through the intercom. The nanobots allow the ship to split into several smaller pieces. "What purpose would that serve?" barked General Baker. "We can break the ship apart and make smaller independent weapons platforms," she explains. "Once the hangar bay has been removed, we place it in a spot we can easily protect, load the civilians onto long-range shuttles, and use the rest of the fuselage, battle bridge, engine bay, and main bridge as individual ships." It takes him a few seconds to wrap his mind around the concept, but eventually agrees. "Do it," and with that the comms clicked off. 6.2. Richard Lange still remembers the day Earth was destroyed. He had been a young child, no more than 6 years old at the time, but he remembered. His grandpa had managed to throw him onto one of the last evacuation shuttles before the nuclear winter froze the planet over. The shuttle doors closing is the last memory of the last surviving member of his family. His parents had died in the war that killed the planet. Both had been in DC when their base was vaporized by the Russian nuclear missiles. Before the war started, his parents had sent Richard to stay with his grandpa up in the state known as Wyoming, although nobody would even know the name now since hardly anyone from that timeline was still alive. Due to Wyoming being of no direct strategic value to the Russians, it was relatively safe from the missiles and most of the radiation. The war that destroyed Earth was the shortest war on record. The country known as the United States had elected a new president who was very incompetent at his job and was basically just a puppet to some very corrupt politicians. Seeing as how this imbecile was now in charge of one of the more powerful countries in the world, he let the power go to his head. He started doing some very ill-advised thing, like threatening the leaders of other powerful nations. This backfired on him, and the world went in a fit of anger. He launched a single nuclear missile at the country of Russia. He had intended to just scare the leader of Russia and detonate the missile once it was over the ocean. However, the Russian leader took this as a first strike and decided to activate the Mutual Assured Destruction Protocol. This mad action caused all of Russia's nuclear missiles to launch at their various targets. In response, the entire world went insane with bloodlust, and everyone launched what they had at the people they hated most. All in all, the war only lasted the 40 minutes it took for nukes to cross the distance. Once all the nukes detonated, the Earth died and began a very slow cycle to its ultimate destruction. Richard grew up in an orphanage on one of the Luna colonies. Thankfully, these colonies had been set up just 1 year before the planet died and had just become self-sustaining. When Richard turned 16, he became interested in space flight and entered into an academy for future space colonists. When he turned 24, the first manned mission to colonize Mars was sent. At the age of 30, after Mars was well into its colonization, he volunteered for yet another space trip. Some scientists had perfected the means of cryogenic freezing, and the shaky government had decided to try and colonize the rest of the galaxy, sending millions of people in cryopods into the blackness of space with hopes for them to land on a planet that could be colonized. Before these explorers, still in their frozen sleep, could arrive, faster than light flight was created, and the frozen people were left in the dust. When they finally did arrive and were awoken, they found the planet they were supposed to colonize was already populated. A good portion of pods overshot their destination, were destroyed by various debris in space, or were picked up by passing ships. Unfortunately, Richard always did have bad luck and Nit only bypassed his ship, but was not even detected by his designated planet sensors. He spent around 125 years stuck in a cryogenic sleep, his body and mind never aging past the time he first entered his sleep. Until one day when he was picked up by the RGS Hades. Once he awoke, the captain arranged for Richard to be educated in the history that he had missed. After he was caught up, Richard expressed his passion for space flight, and that captain had him trained as a fighter pilot. Eventually, Richard worked his way up from a simple pilot to one of the elite fighter escorts. When the rebellion began and his captain decided to leave, Richard followed him and became the squadron leader for 1st Squadron. As Lange gets his squadron in formation, he sees the Prometheus breaking apart. Not realizing what is happening, he contacts his captain. "General, what happened? The Prometheus is breaking apart." Very calmly, Baker replies, "Just a new tactic we are trying. Need you to guard the launch bays." "Roger that, sir." Just then, a squadron of short-range fighters comes flying around the asteroid that is guarding the now split pieces of the Prometheus, and comes barreling straight at the launch bay. Over the squadron comms, Richard gives orders to his squad. "All right, boys, we got another wave. Let's take them out." 6.3 General Baker and Commander Higgins watched as the front of their new ship breaks off. In the heat of battle, they forgot that their ship was now nothing but billions of nanobots. The battle bridge completely separates from the front of the ship and flies off one way. Then the drop pod bay breaks off. Then the landing bay, even the main bridge breaks off from the lifted pylon. The 4 battle drones set up a defensive perimeter around the hangar bays where all of the scared civilians now sit and hope. All sections are now in combat defense positions, all weapons waiting and ready, reports Violet. From every section, missile pod doors open, platforms raise up through the skin of the ship, bringing with them every plasma, laser, and frag cannon up from the underreaches into combat mode. Fighter Squadron 1 through 5 are all flying in formation around the pieces. During the last wave of fighters, most of 5th Squadron had perished before Prometheus could fire their weapons. Captain Darren had just barely survived the sneak attack. He had ordered his men back to the Prometheus for better weapons. What he meant by better weapons was his men strapped a nuke to the underside of their fighters. This provides a great deterrent. Sir Cruiser Magellan is starting its approach from the dark side of the asteroid, reports Anderson. Just then, the knife point of a close-quarters combat cruiser's nose comes into view. "Hold fire till they are completely exposed." Baker orders. The small ship seems to be playing tricks. It exposes the front 2 turrets and fires a few rounds, then pulls back. Reappearing on the other side of the turrets, fire again and retreat. Every time it reappears, it comes out somewhere else. All the rounds it fires never come within 1,000 meters of any ship. Eventually, Darren calls up to the command bridge. "Sir, mind if I go take care of them?" "Stay where you are, Captain," Baker orders. And then the lucky shot hits. The 12th time the Magellan pokes its nose out, its volley completely hits and damn near eliminates 4th Fighter Squadron. Only 2 piglets manage to survive the attack, but they are very badly damaged. "To hell with this." Darren yells as he pushes his fighter into full acceleration. He is literally chasing after the cruiser. As he looks at his radar, he sees that his squad is still with him. "Turn back, boys, this is my fight." To which the rest of his squad tells him to shut up, they are coming too. As 5th Squadron rounds the asteroid, they are met with gunfire, and a lot of it. Immediately 2 of his men explode as their nukes are hit. Darren looks around and manages to send a detailed radar message to the Prometheus. He closes on the He cruiser and opens fire. 3 men down, he manages to shoot out part of the cruiser's sensor grid. 5 men down, they manage to take out a quarter of the turrets. Darren is now by himself. He points his fighter right at the bridge and jumps to full burn. Slamming his small fighter into a vessel much larger usually wouldn't do too much to the larger ship. However, with the nuke strapped to his belly, the collision causes it to go off. Bright light is seen from the other side of the planetoid as Darren's nuke explodes. Even the Royal Guard fleet is blind for a minute as, once the light dims down, High General Vandalar is now down 12 fighter squadrons and now a cruiser. The Magellan had the brains blown off. The bridge and main control unit for the rest of this ship is vaporized. Oxygen and debris are sucked out through the various holes, now puncturing all over the ship. As the ship and crew die, the Magellan starts to orbit the planetoid. "Sir, 5th Squadron has been completely destroyed," reports Violet. "Darren managed to destroy the Magellan." "Roger that, Violet," Commander Higgins responds. The next few attacks were along the same lines, cruisers taking pot shots at them. Eventually, they would get brave and charge the ship pieces, but they were ultimately destroyed. Alana came up with an amazing idea to have her nanobots eat the enemy cruisers and send them back unmanned as mine decoys. The plan worked wonders. The ships were consumed and transformed. The interiors were hollowed out and rigged to explode. They were then sent back around the planetoid. Vandalar's fleet was getting smaller and smaller. Even the smaller cruisers were eventually coming back, bringing death with them. What was left of his small fleet was a couple of now depleted battle carriers, a few battleships, and several cruisers. "Sir, I have a reading of a fleet approaching us from Quadrant B. One of the Hades random officers Vandalar didn't care to learn their names." "Good," the outer fleet finally arrived. He hits his comm pad to open, comes to them. "Royal Guard Outer Fleet, this is High General Vandalar. Lock on to my coordinates and combine with me fleet." There is no response, so he repeats the order. Again, there is no response. He punches up a few buttons to try and get a visual of his approaching fleet, but there is nothing there. "Radar, are you still picking them up?" "Yes, sir. They are at the farthest point of my radar, but I am picking up a large blip. They're slowly approaching." Vandalar looks again, but still nothing. "Reset you terminal, I'm not seeing anything." The ensigns does as he is told, but reports that the blip is still on his screen and slowly getting closer, and then he sees it. The attacks on the Prometheus just stop. Everyone thinks it's some kind of trick, so they stay at battle stations for 2 hours. But no more ships come into their asteroid belt defense grid. Eventually, 1st Squadron does a flyby around the planetoid to check on the enemy's fleet. "Sir, you really need to see this," Captain Land says over the comms. "What is it, Captain?" Baker asks. "Vandalar's fleet, sir. It's destroyed. No sign of the Hades, but I'm seeing 4 battleships, 2 carriers, and a whole lot of debris from those and a few cruisers. Something happened over here." Alana puts the ship back together. The crews of the fighters land, and the Prometheus moves out from behind the planetoid to survey the destruction. The carnage and wreckage is a gruesome sight to behold. Thousands of bodies floating in the vacuum of space, ships with massive holes torn through them. One of the carriers looks like a giant had snapped it in half. "Violet, can you detect any life signs or anything useful we can use in this wreckage?" General Baker asks. "Yes and no," she responds. "No life signs, and it looks like every electrical system out there has been fried or destroyed. There are several parts out there that we can use as well as building materials, though. I can harvest most of the wreckage and store a lot of it, but that will require us to stay here for a while." "Sure, we can all use a rest anyway. Do what you need to." General Baker heads to his quarters to rest, while various nanobots start to take apart the enemy fleet, consuming them and anything on board to make them part of the Prometheus. As General Baker lays down, he closes his eyes and thinks to himself, "Now what the hell could have done this?" Baker finds himself standing on the crest of a dune. All around him is a vast ocean of sand. As he looks around, the sand rises and falls like great oceanic waves. As these waves reach their lowest point, they reveal buildings and vehicles as if a great city once stood, where now it is buried in sand. Out of the corner of his eye, He spots a flurry of movement and quickly turns to follow it, only to spin around and come face to face with his Zoe. Levy. Jesus, Levy, you almost gave me a heart attack. Levy opens his mouth and starts to talk, but no words come out. It's as if his vocal cords were cut. At seeing his puzzled look, Levy waves for Baker to follow him, and he turns and begins to walk down into the ocean of sand, sinking down to his knees with every step. After walking for a half hour, they eventually crest a particular tall wave and Baker spots a city off in the distance. He points it out to Levy, who just waves him off like some pesky insect. Okay, what the hell is going on here? First, you don't speak, and now you are acting like I'm not even here. Levy doesn't say anything but keeps on walking. Baker taps him on the shoulder and points to the city, showing him where to go. Levy nods and smiles, then changes course. Is my hearing going out now? Baker thinks to himself. He can hear the sand moving, so that's a no. They keep walking in silence, but are now on a more direct course towards the city. As they start getting closer, Baker starts to spot odd-shaped solid sand-covered masses when the waves bottom out, almost like a rock under the sand sticking up through it. He stops to take a closer look at one. Something tickles his nerves as he notices the basic shape is that of a human. He reaches a hand out and starts brushing off the sand to reveal a human face, cold to the touch, and starting to decompose. He looks around and spots more of the masses, and every single one of them is in the shape of a body. Hundreds of thousands of people must have died here, and not long ago, judging by the decay. He tries to point this out to Levy, but once again is completely ignored. As they walk into the city's edge, the waves begin to die out and Baker can spot an area that would be a beach if this rising and falling sand was water. The entire solid beach is covered with dead bodies. Men, women, and children of all ages litter the beach like discarded trash. As they walk onto the beach, Levy doesn't seem to notice them at all and steps on the bodies like they aren't even there, while Baker picks his path carefully. After clearing the beach, they proceed to head into a maze of fallen buildings. Baker looks around, and he starts to spot signs that this city was nuked from orbit. Particles of glass litter the ground when the dirt had been boiled, dropping steel beams that look like they were melted and then burnt. The destruction only gets worse the farther they walk. Claustrophobia begins to set in as the buildings seem to have fallen closer together, funneling the pair down a small gap. After what feels like hours of crawling over scrap metal and dodging around broken glass, Baker finally spots an opening in one of the building walls. Levy spots it too and immediately bolts for it, leaving Baker behind, but Baker spots something Levy does not. Smack dab in the middle of this gap is a steep concave hole in the middle of this opening, and it's not an impact crater. There is something seriously wrong here, and Baker feels it. As Levy begins to run down the slope, Baker screams as loud as he can, trying to warn his friend before it's too late. It is of no use. Just as Levy reaches the bottom, Baker's fears are proven right. Out of nowhere, dirt is thrown into the air to block out the view of Levy. As it slowly clears, 8 massive insectoid legs are now sticking out of the ground, each with a pair of hooked claws attached. Without a pause, they plunge down on Levy, and he disappears in another cloud of dust. This time his screams are very audible as blood is quickly thrown up and all over the sides of this hole. When the dust clears for the second time, a huge spider-like creature is standing just above the hole, staring at him. It opens its mouth. "So what are you doing back here?" the spider asks in Levy's voice. "I thought we killed all of you off. I guess we were wrong." He turns to run away, either to find something to fight with or out of sheer fear, but he does not get far. In an instant, the spider creature is on him. The 2 front arms wrapping around his chest spin him around to come face to face with the spider creature. "And where do you think you're going?" "Hum." Then the arms begin to tighten. "Who are you? And where is the rest of your people? I wish to eat them." 2 arms position themselves behind his head and Baker feels as if his ribs are about to break as he is having a hard time trying to breathe. "Don't want to tell me?" The spider's face seems to smile. "I'll find out on my own." It begins to laugh hysterically, even more chilling due to the exact tone Levi laughs in. With that, the claws on the arms begin to dig into his body, and the two above his head push under his skin through the temples and continue to disappear into his skull. Baker actually hears and registers the crunch of his skull as it splits. Baker wakes himself from the night terror by screaming himself into full alertness. Taking a few minutes to calm down and regain his awareness, he is most thankful to the engineer who thought to make all the rooms soundproof. Don't want to have to explain to the neighbors why I'm screaming in the middle of the night. While sitting in his bed, he turns to look out his small window into the vastness of space. The cold view slowly cooling down his body from the intensity of his night terror. This particular dream was definitely a strange one. He had had night terrors before, but usually they were about things that happened in the past. "Sir, are you okay?" Violet asks through the speakers built into his room. "Oh, why, yes, I'm fine. Just a bad dream," he replies, just now realizing she must have been monitoring him. He goes to roll back over to go back to sleep when he sees a flashing green light coming from his desk, showing he has a message waiting for him. So he puts on his legs and walks over to his desk, flops down in his chair, and proceeds to go through his emails. While he is doing this, Violet goes through her records to research her new commander and finds that he has been through the worst battles anybody could imagine. Due to these battles, he was diagnosed with severe PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder, a state where the violence of a traumatic experience seems to haunt a person's daily life and can make them nervous over the smallest, most insignificant things. She found he was prone to having severe night terrors and would usually wake up punching at things that were not there or screaming at something. She tucks this information away and proceeds to look at her data banks to try and find a way to help him sleep better. The ship is only as good as its weakest members, and she needed everyone in tip-top condition. General Baker steps out onto the bridge to find his executive officer in a heated debate with Alana. That quickly comes to an end when they both see him standing there looking at both of them. He just shakes his head and proceeds to sit in his chair. "So I got a message from the King of Roses. Your brother has landed on Honduras, and apparently he is going through some intense training." "That's good. Didn't know we got a transmission." Levi responds. "What kind of training is he getting?" "Apparently, it's something to do with the Titan suit. I hope they are not modifying it. If they are, I think Anderson will freak out." "Maybe, so what's our status?" "All resources that could be scavenged have been," Violet answers before anybody else got a chance. "All fighters that were lost in the battle have been replaced. All damage has been fixed. And we have 3 drone ships attached to the belly." "What do you mean drone ships?" "There was enough metal and spare resources that I was able to completely build 3 of our cruiser-style ships. Their power banks will add to the Prometheus, and their guns can be remotely controlled as can their engines. Think of them as bigger forms of our battle drones, only these can be piloted." Violet's voice has taken on a pitch while explaining that seems to come across as she is extremely excited. For a gestalt to reach the heights of its being, it needs 2 apexes. The first is the apex of breadth, the ability to spread wide itself to cover the vast reaches of a planet it is on, and to then expand out from dirt and into sky and beyond. The second is the apex of power, the ability to quell rival gestalts. For each time the gestalt expands its breadth, it is likely to encounter another gestalt. Gestalts are incompatible with each other and will always eliminate the other. If a gestalt is compatible, it is used to reach new heights for either apex. If it is not, it is simply erased. This many had reached both apexes uncountable times. This many had traveled from planet to sky, to ring, to star, to star, to star, and so on. Not every ring had another gestalt, but the ones that did, this many had assimilated. Curiously, in some of the planes that this many had touched, there were beings too, very small, disconnected from each other, and wholly incapable of reaching one apex or the other. The small beings never had the cooperation of any gestalt, though they spread to each uncornered edge of their planet. That was not true breadth. In most cases, this many simply ignored them. This many had tried assimilating them before, but the expansion of apexes were negligible. The assimilation of the little beings' biospheric coverings on their planets were more useful, though that usually silenced the small beings. The little ones do sometimes try to stop the assimilation, but they could never influence a gestalt of two apexes. Still, this many is not often in need of biospheres, only when another gestalt's attacks are too immense. This many had never lost. This many had gained too much breadth and power, but especially because this many had known a third apex, the apex of knowledge. No other gestalt had come close to this many's third apex, the ability to learn and experience. Each gestalt this many assimilates or even destroys. This many's knowledge expands. This many's breadth and power too expands. In recent time, this many had not landed on rings with biospheric worlds. This many would not have starved, but the apex of knowledge provided caution to the weakening of breadth and power if this many couldn't assimilate even a singular biosphere. But this many had found a new ring, a star of yellow with a single biospheric world, third from it. Even as this many approached, this many had sensed breadth, but the absence of a gestalt even sensed power. This many slowed the approach and reached out with a coagulation of gestalt, knowledge providing caution again. The coagulation was lanced into nothing. The absence of a gestalt but the presence of power confused this many even with knowledge. But the third apex assured this many that the absent gestalt would not overcome the whole of this many. Pushed into the ring itself, but breadth was too large that this many had to push into with coagulation after coagulation. Each coagulation was lanced from existence, but this many was still many apexes of breadth large. This many's whole gestalt pushed into the ring itself, and there was still an absence of another gestalt, but each breadth of this many was trickling smaller and smaller. This many projected power out to try to stop the absentee from lancing too much breadth. Knowledge warned and warned. The lancing slowed and then stopped. This many's knowledge slowed its warning and too stopped, as the push was made forward toward the small blue biosphere. In another day, this many would arrive. But this many was rent asunder. The absentee projected power so strong that this many's gestalt was for a moment divided in two before becoming one again. Breadth was at its nadir, and so too was power. What was this absentee? This many's knowledge compelled to reach out. Sensed. Small beings. With knowledge, the sense sharpened to reveal multitudes upon multitudes of small beings, even other gestalts so small this many was blind to them. How did such little beings rival a gestalt like this many, when those small beings on those planes could nary withstand a spark of power? Was this a fourth apex? Knowledge begun to wane. This few woke again, power and breadth were gone, but knowledge not. Are you awake, strange? Knowledge reached out, but not from this few zone. Sleep came to this many long ago, and so did its disparate wakefulness. But through assimilation and attaining uncountable of the first two apexes, this many no longer needed to rest. But this few, lacking in breadth and power, knows of sleep and wake. This few is awake. Fascinating, the outer knowledge spoke again. This few wishes knowledge to provide? This few urged knowledge to extend and sense, but what little breadth was confined. A substance of solid and charged with plasma contained. We had so many theories about you, what you were, where you came from, and to think we actually managed to get you to talk. Okay, Emily, don't get distracted. This few had knowledge none. This few implores knowledge to provide. Incredibly alien speaking and perception. Noted. The outer knowledge had a definition to it, a lilt. For now, maybe recontextualizing will help. I'm known as Emily. What heir do you refer to yourself as? Emily lilt knowledge. This few wishes knowledge to provide. You yourself. You as in, your whole, gestalt, being, self. Emily lilt provided. This few's knowledge stretched and thrummed, reaching the apex to try to understand. Once this many was this many, but now this few refers to this few as this few. Okay, this is going to get confusing. Emily lilt was not part of this few, That much was clear, but breadth could not reach out to understand if Emily Lilt was a gestalt too. The plasma solid substance stopped breadth from reaching out. Let's try something. When you refer to your gestalt, when this few refers to this few, replace that with we. Emily Lilt offered. This few provides knowledge to Emily Lilt. The outer knowledge made its volume lower as it repeated we's inquire. You provide me with knowledge? Yes, I think. We confirm to provide knowledge and receive knowledge from Emily Lilt. Great, Emily Lilt's volume heightened. Okay, getting right into it, what are you? This few is the remnants of a gestalt. We once had the apex of breadth and of power, but now we's remaining apex is knowledge. Can this few explain the apexes? What do you mean? The apex of breadth is we as wide, we as encompassing planets, and we's reach. The apex of power is we's fight, ability to lance gestalts and matter. Gestalts that we has lanced, and we has assimilated attained similar heights in apexes. I need to parse that later. Better questions. This few requires knowledge. Emily Lilt provide this few with knowledge. What is Emily Lilt? It might be hard to explain. The fact that you're using Lilt to describe me, I can't even begin to guess. Okay, keep it succinct. Emily, ask the right questions. The outer knowledge paused. What do you think I am? This outer knowledge is strange, providing a question and answer, rather than an answer and answer. Emily Lilt had referred to a concept known as I and I'm before. Knowledge dictates that these were correlated, and were correlated to Emily Lilt too. This few perceives through breadth, but we cannot extend. We know Emily Lilt only as outer knowledge. Emily Lilt is knowledge that is not part of we, yet provides information all the same. A strange concept. Emily Lilt was silent for a time. I'm human, a human named Emily. Humans aren't a gestalt consciousness like you. This few felt knowledge stretch and thrum again. Emily Lilt is a small being. Ooh, sure, yes. This few's knowledge strains. This many was once of 3 apexes, but it was lanced into this few. Provide knowledge, Emily Lilt. Emily Lilt was silent again, but eventually provided a projection, but not information, a quick sound of air. Before another inquiry could be asked, the outer knowledge provided, you deduce things quickly, or else I would have had to explain every word I used. Emily Lilt paused. I think we have time. Let me tell you a story. Centuries ago, when humanity was still a few decades into spacefaring, we made first contact with other sapient spacefarers. It was an exciting time. They called themselves Therigo. The Therigos weren't interested in communicating though, not hostile, just cold. They had their own varying cultures, tradition, and art, but they weren't as social as us. We had to try talking with them anyway. We couldn't just give up. But if they really didn't want to be bothered, we would leave them alone. Well, we found out about their lack of variety of food. They were all prepared similarly. It was all safe and edible, but had no excitement. We offered to show them more ways to prepare it, seasonings, cooking methods, all sorts of things. We couldn't offer too much because we didn't know how different their biology was to ours. All we knew was that they could definitely handle salt. That could have been a biological show if we were wrong, but they could. Before we sent in more methods, we wanted to make sure they were biologically safe for them. So we agreed to do an exchange of information, and the rest is history. The Regos became our first friends, and the first to join the Pan-Stellar Union. We found more species as time went on. Some were eager to be friends, some were cold like the Therigos, and we even went to war with some. In the end, the Pan-Stellar Union became bolstered by each species, and humans were elected the ambassador species. I don't know why we managed to befriend so many people. We're not the most friendly species, we're not the widest explorers, we're not the smartest, but I think it's because we have a little bit of all of them, even if we're not the best in any of them. This fused knowledge strains on why Emily Lilt is providing we this story knowledge. I'm getting to that. We met another species, Impe Karen. The Ingal Predillus sect we made contact with was warlike, having just annihilated a more peaceful faction, and they were expansive too, having about hundreds of systems under their boot. And see, humans have a sort of righteous anger that we wave around when we see injustice. That's not a trait that's solely ours, but combined with our other traits means we were the fastest to declare war against things we thought were unjust. Most of the Union backed us too, so it was going to be an even fight. This war did not end well, not because the sect won, but because a galactic threat arrived at the sect's doorstep. Planet after planet under their rule was sucked of life. It didn't matter if it was a garrison world or a conquered colony, the biospheres were annihilated. The Impey Karen survivors made a full retreat toward Union space and asked for help, and we gave them sanctuary as much as we could. This threat had many names among the Union: the Devouring, the Silence, the Storm of Annihilation, and most commonly, the Dust. It had a strange ability to distort localized physics, travel faster than light without any engines, assimilate most living matter into itself. Not to mention, it was literally the size of uncountable numbers of dust particles. The only hope we had was that it was large enough already that even with its strange FTL capabilities, once it entered the vicinity of a star system, it wouldn't be able to enter it all at once, and it was far away and still way slower than most artificial FTL drives. The Union wanted the Sol system to be our staging grounds for this last stand. We pleaded to the Union not to do that. Earth was farther away from the dust than most of the other species' homeworlds, but they were adamant that they would evacuate each of their ancestral homeworlds for our sake, and hold the ground at Earth. They said it was just as much their home. Figuratively and literally, they were kinder right. The Sol system housed the most diverse density of different species, and if it fell, morale would plummet. It was also strategic, since the Sol system was the closest in proximity to as many Union nations as possible. They would get there en masse, ready to strike before the dust would even be able to reach us in a few more centuries. That meant century-long meetings of the mind could be opened and new technology quickly uncovered. The Sol system entered a sort of bittersweet golden age. Life improved, so much good was done, but all of it was in anticipation of a force of destruction making its way there. I do think some of humanity still feels guilt for accepting the proposal and letting all those other farther worlds fall. But it worked. Developments in multiple fields meant that when the dust arrived, we put up a fight. We suffered losses, but utilizing psionics to dampen our presence, near-reality warping weaponry, and cunning sharpened by centuries, we beat the dust. The concept was foreign, strange, banded together small beings, and even few gestalts had bested this many, a gestalt of 3 apexes. Small beings have never been capable of any of the apexes, or at least, this few never understood that they were. This few's knowledge had eluded this few. Small beings. You? I get it, you're angry. We were the ones that destroyed you, but I didn't intend to lie to you, at least. This few's knowledge strains. Angry is not known. We only wishes to state that there is a 4th apex, one that allowed you to become the apex of all 3 others. But I do not know the 4th apex name. Silence from Emily Lilt. We only have many questions, but one stands atop. This few was not destroyed, as the story was told. Yeah, you were still life. A lot of Union thought you should have been destroyed, but you were whittled down to so few particles of dust that a vote was passed to put you into stasis, because despite the destruction, deep down, some of us felt like you were alive, and it was a waste to annihilate such a unique existence. It was a gamble to be sure, but we need to make another one. This few is awake for a reason. Emily Lilt projected the sound of air again. Yeah, maybe this is too much of a gamble, but yes, you're awake because we need you. That golden age had gone stagnant after a few centuries, and I don't think we could pull a miracle like that again. The stars are going out, and they're not just going out relativistically, they're going out in real subjective time. So, we needed to, at least talk with the only other potentially universal threat we knew of. This few provides knowledge and aid if this few is too provided for. Emily Lilt provided a new vocalization, like the rapid sound of multiple bursts of air. Well, we'll see how bad of an idea this turns out to be. This fuse knowledge thrums. This is the fourth apex. There is no name for it yet for this few. The ability to reconcile something disparate from the being, the ability to assimilate without destroying, the ability that once annihilated a gestalt of 3 apexes, and that now was calling upon the same gestalt's aid. Metadestin, Assistant Xenobiologist Dust of Annihilation Research Facility, Imelda System. Hooves carried me to the stasis chamber where Dr. Aleister should have vacated an hour ago. She was brilliant, but she was also headstrong. If we lost a great mind because she wanted to personally speak with Stasized Dust, I was going to kill her. A growl shook my throat as I stood outside the observation chamber doors, hoping that she was indeed fine. 2 Union guards stood outside, and I nodded to them. The observation chamber was highly protected. Invisible fields of differing frequencies shielded the chamber, as well as visible blast doors and reinforced glass. Most species in the Union had similar lifespans, the oldest going for at most 2 centuries. I personally wasn't there during the Golden Age of Sol, nor for the battle afterward. But we've seen the videos and know the danger. The only other person there was Security Chief Ard. The cabrid was floating a few inches off the ground. Their cloth-like limbs were subdued, but still animated. I greeted them in the cabrin to vocal language before switching to translator comms. No one was expected to be fluent in every language in the Union, but as a xenobiologist, I wanted to keep my expressions honed. "Did she get annihilated?" I asked. Characteristically callous, Dr. Mide. "She's been conversing with the dust for a while now. I gave her more time in there. It seemed to be going well." Ard's voice was filtered through the collar around their upper body. Cabrin were telepathic, but used transcoms that translated mind to voice. Different species react differently to telepathic communications, and these transcoms were just a polite archaism. "Seriously?" I asked with a hoof backstep. The cabrid flowed one of their limbs in a gesture of invitation toward the glass window in front of us. Only a human, no, only Emily Aleister would willingly confine herself with a galactic threat for hours to talk with it. I carried myself to the observation window beside Chief Ard and saw Dr. Aleister with her back to the glass, using a biped chair in the complete opposite way with her chest leaning forward against the backrest. She turned to me and flashed her canines, without verbally acknowledging my presence. She turned back to the subject of the day. The spinning and writhing black mass of particles sealed in a plasma-reinforced glass chamber. "We'll continue later. I'll be back." This few awaits knowledge to acquire again. Await Emily Lilt return. The sudden vocalizations of the dust almost knocked me off my feet. It was filtered through a mind-to-voice transcom if I guessed right. But the way it spoke was so loud and hair-raising, but without any markers of sapient emotion. I could feel every strand of my fur stand on end. I had to shake my head. "Are you all right, Dr. Mide?" Ard asked, floating a tendril to my back. I shivered, and it seemed my fur was slowly calming back down. "Yes," I managed out with a growl. "Doesn't it feel like that to you too?" "It does not. I am underqualified to formulate a theory, but perhaps it's because cabrin are used to telepathy." "That sound, I guess," I said, stroking the fur on my forelimbs to get them to calm down. "But if Dr. Aleister was talking to that thing for an hour or so, that means it's not just telepathic acclimation. I don't think even Emily can keep that amount of adverse reaction down." The door behind us opened, startling me and instinctively coiling myself. "Whoa, Doctor, it's just me. Don't worry," came Dr. Aleister's voice. The dust's vocalizations must really have shaken me more than I thought. I'll need to make a note of why that might be. "You're jumpier than usual. Is everything okay?" I stood up straight and stroked my fur again. "Yes, sorry." The dust shook me. "I should be fine." The xenobiologist's look of concern subtly shifted, with her eyes narrowing to one mixed with skepticism. I've worked with her enough to know something was on her mind. "And yes, I'm thinking of getting myself a psychological evaluation too. Maybe arrange for more and-pay Karen volunteers to see if they have as much of an adverse reaction." I responded to her imaginary question with a guess. Her lips curled down with a nod. Huh, you sure you're not psionic? Mide? Could be two completely new discoveries in a single day. Humans had a penchant for saying the most far-fetched things. Impe Karen had never, and likely never, would be able to demonstrate psionic abilities themselves. That was just how our biology leaned. But in all my research, many things that seemed impossible became possible under the Golden Age, so one could never be too sure. I shook my head. Anyway, what did you learn? I just arrived. I hazarded a glance back through the observation window and found the gathering of particles no longer writhing and pulsing. It was put back into stasis. It's really a gestalt. That theory was right. I think every single particle is alive, but it operates as the whole. I'm glad our ancestors decided to preserve it, though I wish we could have woken it up under more benign circumstances. Her voice dipped, and so did her head. Another low growl shook my chest, and I mimicked her head tilt. Whatever the phenomenon was, it was cause for concern. Most of the general Union populace wasn't aware of it. The story was regulated, yes, but it wasn't censored. It was downplayed as a strange anomaly, and the general public eventually shrugged it off, though a few still latched onto it. Fortunately, even though the Golden Age had passed, the Union's senses, or paranoia, was still retained, and dozens of research projects were launched in the background into this anomaly. The galaxy wanted to be ready for another dust of annihilation. I clopped a hoof to break the silence and shift my stance. Did we learn anything else, Doctor? Emily crossed her forelimbs and leaned on one leg. Yeah, it calls itself this few, and it learns fast. It started out not knowing what the pronoun you meant, but that was the only thing I needed to teach it. It parsed and processed information quick, but I don't know just how much of what I told it understood. Ard's voice vibrated. Dangerous, Dr. Leister. If it learns so quickly, that's risky. I appreciate the concern, and that's definitely a concern, but I think there's a way to cooperate with it. It didn't seem malevolent. It seemed like any other living sapient being, but with its own thought patterns. Thought patterns that we've proved across thousands of species can change and adapt without coercion. We shouldn't forget the failures, though, I added. The Shikuna swarm, the Andromeda mind virus, all of them were gestalts too. Emily was silent and dipped her head again. My chest contracted at seeing my colleague and friend disappointed, but as her co-xenobiologist, I had to provide a voice of reason when she got too excited. Her head darted up again. Maybe it'll be different. The Arfax Collective, Aorus, they're slightly different, but they're gestalt too. We've befriended them, we might as well try here. All science is trying, maybe failing, but you can't fail or succeed if you didn't try in the first place. I shook my head as I failed to hold in the guttural emanations from my belly. Doctor, save your inspirational speeches for when we start our initial proposal. Ard emitted a measured laugh too, like chiming vocalizations. Absolutely preposterous, but I will do my best to keep you and the rest of this facility safe. We'd have to see if this optimism would yield results. Wake again. Breadth reached out first and found again the plasma solid barrier. Sleep was given easily, not of this few's volition. Curious. Knowledge strained. Hey, this few. How are you feeling today? The outer knowledge provided. Emily Lilt returned. Emily Lily provide we. Feeling today? This few's knowledge projected. Knowledge twitched. This few's projection was different. We's knowledge had not realized until now, but this few's projection of knowledge was not solely information, but mixed with the feedbacking vibration of atmosphere. The vibration rattling into the plasma solid enough that it vibrated into the air inside the barrier, to where breadth could learn for knowledge. Well, feeling is just... This few's projection causes vibrations in air? Provide knowledge, Emily Lilt. Emily Lilt paused. The containment field you're in is hooked into a translator communicator that lets us hear what you communicate as sound, which is what we call those vibrations in the air. This few's knowledge expands. This few was provided knowledge earlier. Emily Lilt provided sound. Not information, but a quick burst of air. Emily Lilt paused again, longer. Before providing, "Oh, you mean like the outer knowledge projected the same atmosphere sound, like that?" Confirming. "That's what we call a sigh when we're, feeling disappointed or tense, we tend to sigh." Feeling. Sigh. Strangest concepts. Knowledge strained harder than this few ever strained its third apex. Okay, this could be a breakthrough. Us small beings, even some gestalts, many of us feel physically, we feel matter, but we also sense it. I think it's something like your breadth, where you can push a part of yourself to understand and sense things. Small beings have breadth, small beings are too small for breadth. Sure, it's not completely equal, but small beings have small breadths too, I guess. This few churned knowledge, small beings were no gestalts, yet had breadth. Each small being had breadth of its own. But these are not the apex of breadth. Emily Lilt paused again. No, definitely not. But we still sense and feel, right? This few churns knowledge. Information is parsing and processing. I understand if you need time to process it. This few will continue churning, provide more knowledge for the now time. I need to tend to some things, but I'll keep you awake. We'll talk later time, okay? This few requires Emily Lilt provide, okay. Okay just means yes, sometimes. Okay. Emily Lilt emitted more sound like before, like many sighs but more in volume and rapidity. God, we need to get a xenolinguist. This few continued churning, but would inquire at later time. Rosa Caballero, research volunteer, Imelda System Research Facility. The shuttle docked itself with the station at almost exactly the projected time. We're a few minutes late, Kiva shook her head. Yeah, because you had to use the pisser. What is with you and water? The bladder on that lady was an anomaly. Could drink so much alcohol on good days, but give her a water sphere, and she couldn't hold it in. That wasn't even because she was the Rego. They handle water and alcohol just as well as humans do. It just means I hydrate fast. It's a gift. She snarked. Her noseless smile bared most of her flattened teeth. You could usually tell exactly what the Rego's emotion was. Even their smiles had differences that most species noticed. Her and I were regular volunteers for different sorts of research. We actually met when we volunteered for the same xenomedicine trials. The doctors were so accommodating and nice, but I told her I was never ever going to participate in medical trials again. It didn't even hurt. But seeing out of your ears instead of your eyes was wild in a bad way. At least we found out I had some latent psionic ability, because that did not happen to the other Osai humans. All right, cut the chatter, Andre said, the tall human man standing in front. You know the drill, but if you don't, you just head down the dock. Consent forms on your right. He turned his back and displayed his right hand. Refreshments at every mini-station. On your left, he displayed his left hand. We know what left and right is, Andre, we're not kids. Came Teta's voice, which elicited a few chuckles from the volunteers. Most research trips like this took a while, so you usually became friends with your fellow volunteer. I just met the Impey Karen today. She was pretty devil may care. Come on, Teta. Gotta remember that not all species use the same directions. It's a helpful reminder. Teta sighed. Yeah, sorry. She tried to play it off, but it was clear she was sorry. Sometimes maybe research coordinators do treat volunteers like kids, but I get what Andre means. All right, and I know some volunteers like to just skim the documents, so we have to reiterate, what you see here might be harrowing, so even after you sign that document, feel free to back out at any time. The volunteers all nodded and voiced agreements before Andre led us out the ship. Kiva trailed behind me, towering a whole head over me, as I retrieved a consent form and found a table to write on. What do you think they're going to have us do? They're going to trials and never space us. They're going to separate us, put us into rooms, and then have us duke it out to find out who's the strongest predator. Did you notice how every single volunteer is a different species? I stated the blatant falsehood. Kiva snorted. Yes, I noticed 5 Impey Karen, who are not at all the same species, and the 3 microbears who are definitely obligate carnivores with their really sharp teeth and gigantic stature. We let a moment pass and laughed. Some people probably would have found our humor maybe crass or rude, but we're not friends with them. As I read over the consent form, it was reiterated again and again that this particular research project could deal lasting psychological harm to volunteers. It was about researching a contained gestalt entity that possibly had some sort of psionic pressure that could mess with people. Impe Karen in particular were warned about this possibility. It mentioned that each species would be grouped together and led into an observation chamber. The researchers would record our reactions, and we'd leave. Medics and security were on standby. Everything seems pretty safe and straightforward. The presence of security means maybe it's not the safest, but most volunteers seemed to be signing. No one was leaving. I submitted the document and hovered over Kiva. She was the only Rigo volunteer here. It wasn't unusual to be the only one of your species in a volunteer research project. How are you feeling? Nervous? Yeah, actually, maybe just consent form nerves. They like making these things sound scarier than they are. Better that than the other way, right? Yup, she grinned, an obvious nervous grin. Once we were all settled in, Andre led us to the chamber as I snatched a floating water sphere from one of the refreshment stations. The doors were... My gut felt awful. Immediately, it was like my fight or flight was flicked in the head. I looked to Andre and the 2 other human volunteers who didn't seem to notice. They seemed completely fine. I let go of the water sphere, which just floated in midair. Rosa, you okay? Kiva asked, putting a hand on my shoulder. Why, yeah, it's gone. I don't know. Maybe just nerves again. I looked at the doors in front of me. The feelings passed, but what was behind them? Click, the autopilot switch's button sounded. With its comforting beep beep-I, Kai-ik, could rest easy. I clacked my mandibles as I skitter sounded onto my metal ship's floor. Tap tap came a metal sound from the side, as my co-pilot called for my attention. Minted was not Markin like me. Clear from her soft fur and ears that she was Rusin. Markin found friendship with soft-fleshed species harder, so difficult to emit sound with soft flesh more than chitin and scales. Doubly so with Rusin, who sported fur on top of soft flesh. Kai-ik and Minted were different though. Been friends for a few years now. Had to be friends. Minted informed me with a series of emulated click-clicks and knocking and tapping. We're approaching a debris field. I think that's our ticket. Me and Minted's friendship surpassed the need for transcoms. Besides, doubtful union would provide transcoms to independent privateers unless they were tracked. Kai-ik just placed autopilot on, I tapped in disappointment, though I did look forward to switching it off and listening for its click again. I don't know why you bother with autopilot, buddy, she click-clacked and snapped, though her term of endearment had to be spoken. We both know we can. Her knocking faded. Kai-ik clicked mandibles. What is it? With one tap, and her eyes staring forward, she pointed out the viewfinders. My legs tapped around, turning me to what she was seeing. Beyond the debris field, past the wreckages, was nothing. Absolutely nothing, not even stars, not even the outer arm of the galaxy. There was no light pollution to hide them at all, but it was a blanket of pure black. Before we could register or understand anything, a bright white emanated through the viewfinder, throwing interference onto the screens as it begun glowing brighter. No, it was getting closer. Space. Mind flowed into me. Awareness. Dark. Cold. Empty. Light flowed into my sense of sight next. One part was pure darkness, void and nothing. The other was filled with stars and light and matter. The absence of air and sound flowed next. Sense of hearing. Sense of smell. Discomfort at their absence, but not harm. Sense of touch. I raised my appendages, 2 arms on both sides of me, glowing. Memory flowed into me next. I remember my planet, my star system, a world of dreamers. We tamed gravity first, allowing us to fling ourselves across our numerous worlds without any harm. then light, information, knowledge, and kin spreading across multiple systems. Then death. There are those that wish to stay forever, they could. There were those that wished to rest too, and they were granted. We reached the heights of civilization. It took a few million years to balance ourselves with nature perfectly, but the mind allowed us to supply us with converted energy. No longer did we have to imprison stars to power our technology. But we were gone. The light of our empire snuffed out in a single day. The last of us screamed into the void, directing all of our psionic ability to create a warning. A witness. Despite my no longer individual biological form, I could not comprehend the nothingness that swallowed our civilization. There are other worlds and other beings. I must warn them. I sense two minds close by. They must not be here. It is dangerous. There is an uneasiness in this place. I drove myself forward toward them, with the shattered nothingness behind me. Chi-Ik-Tr-Tr, independent privateer, uncharted space. Pull backward, I slammed my mandibles, jumping into my seat. My throat vibrated a panic chirping, even as we started getting the ship to turn back. Minted was already on the controls, even though she was also screaming. The light was still getting closer and closer. Stop, I wish you no harm. A voice in my mind, arranging my thoughts to translate. Chi-Ik has heard about telepathy. Is this what it's like? It was unsettling. There was no sound at all, but it was clear and present in its message. My Rusin companion also seemed to have received this and was looking at me. My chair squeaked swiveled toward the viewfinder, feeling not as panicked anymore. Despite the eeriness, it felt comforting and sincere. When the light got close enough, we saw what it was, a being of pure light with 4 forelimbs. Its lower body extended into a tail. It had a head too. Chi-Ik didn't know why we weren't scared anymore, but Chi-Ik didn't think we could outrun this thing even if we tried. Listen, please, there is a terribleness here that you should escape. It stopped short of our ship. Ooh, I began clicking my mandibles and feet. Chi-Ik would like to know what big psychic thing is? I am witness, it. Telepath wide again. And I wish to deliver a warning to the largest collection of sapience you can muster. If you provide direction, The psychic thing was cut off, as they turned their head. Chi-Ik almost couldn't see what they spooked them, but something that could spook something that big. I wasn't sure I wanted to see. Minted soundlessly put a paw on my shell and pointed at something in the viewfinder. Witness had their head pointed there too. It made me shudder, making my shell shake with a scared, high-pitched kick-a-kick. I saw it by the border of the debris and the nothing space. Uncanny? Chi-Ik's mind could only think of a predator, like a featureless reptile made of glass and space, using its padded feet to scale the walls of reality. Chi-Ik's grasping limbs were clacking and shaking, but I needed to get us out of here. Witness extended a bright limb at the creature and shot out something that warped the light around it, but the predator just unstuck its feet and fell to the ground to avoid the blast. Like it was mocking gravity, or this was my mind trying to rationalize what Chi-Ik was seeing. When it fell, I could almost see the space around it thrum, like it was actual glass wobbling. All of this, because of the vacuum of space, had no sound. This display, its lack of sound, I could feel it putting pressure on my brain. While my eyes were locked onto the display, I felt arms on my thorax as Minted lifted me onto the pilot seat, her hopping onto her own seat. We need to go, she tapped and clicked. My mandibles kick-a-kick shuddering, but I shook myself and tapped on the panel in front of me, confirming. Our ship begun backing, building up speed before retrothrusters turned us around as fast as we could go. I looked over to the hyper-light engines which weren't up yet. My shell clicking in frustration and fear. Come on. The eldritch battle was behind us, but I could feel the psychic echoes of each blast, even without looking at the viewfinders. Chi-Ik slammed a limb on the panel, frustrated at its slow start-up. I clicked my mandibles. If we don't get annihilated, we need to get a new hyper-light engine. Minted scared laughed. Yeah, buddy, she tapped. I had to glance at the viewfinder, seeing Witness holding off the predator. It shifted into an invertebrate-like form, using its nothing tentacles to drag itself forward toward Witness, but Witness smoothly flew backward and sent out wide arcs of white light toward the predator. It shifted to avoid one and struck the other with tentacles, causing the white arc to become filled with nothingness and disappear. The predator whipped a clawed untendril toward Witness too fast, that it grazed one of their arms, absorbing the light from it instantly. The big psychic avatar thing was at a disadvantage. If Witness loses, the nothing predator will come after us, Minted scratched. We can't do anything to help. That is way above Kai Ix and Minted's pay grade. Missiles won't deplete our hyper light charge. We can help this thing. Besides, think of the rewards Witness could offer. Minted patted on her chair with an emphatic open hand. Kai Ik doubted Witness could give us anything we really wanted. I had to find a way to harden Minted's bleeding heart, but she is persuasive. Ready, missiles, I snapped simply. I could see Minted smile and squeaked her swiveling seat to the weapons panel, launching 2 missiles at the predator while it was distracted by another blast. The missiles detonated right at the predator's main body. The cephalopod-looking nothingness shifted into a blob before hurtling in our direction. Before we could react, a whip of white and distortions stopped it in its tracks. Witness, holding the thing at bay, extended a hand to us and flashed once. "You must leave. Thank you for trying." As they communicated, the star system around us shifted and the psychic avatar flung us into hyper-light, away from the system. Witness shattered space. As I ushered the 2 minds and their ship into hyper-light, the predator slinked forward and absorbed another of my limbs, its never tendril sucking up the energy in mind. I feared not death, but I still feared. Because despite this adversary, I knew this was not the incomprehensible threat that shattered space itself. This was just a being that started existing in this broken place. I projected myself, my whole self, the entire gestalt of our warning into a lance of light, destruction towards this predator. I pulled myself close to it and thrust the destructive projection at it, causing it harm and pain as it begun to dissipate. I felt myself dissipating too. It took all my power and strength to destroy this creature. My only hope was that the shard of our warning, of Witness that I left with those 2, would find its way to where it needed to go. And I faded. Rosa Caballero, Research Volunteer, Imelda System Research Facility. The large doors opened and my stomach dipped again. I pulled my arms around me and shifted my weight. It wasn't as incredibly awful as the first time, but this still felt uncomfortable. It slowly subsided, though the feeling evened out, and it stopped getting any better. I took a breath and followed the coordinator and the other volunteers in. It was an observation chamber, but one that was reinforced to hell and back. The blast doors were still sealed over the glass, which hid whatever was behind it. Didn't really help with the foreboding atmosphere. "Before we start with the experiments," Andre begun, "this will be your last chance to turn back before being exposed to whatever is behind that blast door. But that doesn't mean you can't back out when the experiments have started. Please take care of yourselves. We'll start in 10 minutes. Let me know if anyone changes their mind." "Rosa, seriously, you sure you're okay?" Kiva asked from my side. I put a hand on her arm. Yeah, I'll be fine, I think. I don't feel like backing out right now." She pursed her mouth tight, but nodded, my hand still on her. The room itself felt different. Most of the volunteers were pretty chatty when we came in, but there was a sense of nerve in the air. I'm pretty sure I wasn't the only one uncomfortable, and we all noticed. I don't think it was just Andre's small speech that did that. The research coordinator cleared his throat and motioned to one side of the room. There were 2 other people there, who I didn't notice when we entered, maybe too wrapped up in this feeling of dread. They seemed like scientists. "This is Dr. Emily Leister," he motioned to the human woman. "She is the lead researcher for this project." "Hello, all. I hope we can learn something from each other," she said in a chipper tone. She had huge preschool teacher energy, but none of it seemed forced. She also seemed pretty similar in age to me. Andre motioned to the other scientist, an Impe-Karen man, slightly shorter than Dr. Leister. "This is Dr. Miededestin. co-researcher to Dr. Aleister. He clopped a hoof down, then nodded. "Good day," he stated plainly. The two researchers could not have been more different. "Okay, we'll get back to you all in 10, but feel free to ask us anything," the lead researcher said, which got her a quick elbow from her co-researcher. Ooh, anything besides about the experiment. We do need genuine first reactions. We want to keep the sample size sterile with as little pre-knowledge as possible." That sounded like a mimetic study. Kiva and I had never volunteered for those. Scientific projects that called for volunteers were already deemed to be safe for volunteers, but I just didn't like the thought of it ever since the xenomedicine incident. I could back out. Maybe I should have, but despite the lingering discomfort, there was a genuine curiosity about where this all would go. The 10 minutes passed with me making conversation with Kiva and occasionally the other volunteers, but the lingering dread didn't make any of the 10 minutes pass quickly. We were instructed to group up with our respective species. "Hey, good luck, don't get exploded," I said to Kiva as we separated. "You too. Feel free to get disintegrated though, much cleaner," she replied, and we exchanged laughs. Metadestin, Assistant Xenobiologist Dust of Annihilation Observation Chamber, Imelda System. Our call for volunteers was approved much faster than our request for a xenolinguist. From what we know, they were still a few weeks out, even if they'd be approved. We had to work quickly since we didn't know the extent of the phenomenon. If it was subjectively snuffing out stars, it could be here today, or even yesterday if it was paracausal enough. The 10 minutes passed, and the volunteers were divided into their respective species. The Impey Karen group was first. It was simple. Dr. Aleister would converse with the dust again, and we would record the group's reactions. Aorus had provided 2 recorder-observer drones, which were engineered to look neutral, leaning to friendly to as much species as possible. Their metallic bodies were as small as most microbears, in the form of a tapering cylinder. Their locomotion was handled by wheels and gyroscopes hidden under their cylinders. A 2-person security detail also lingered near the wall of the observation room, just in case things got out of hand. "Recorder-observer units are ready, Doctor," one of the drones said in a synthesized voice. "Good," I said and put a finger to my earpiece. "Andre, send the Impey Karen volunteers in." I nodded at the group as they entered, but before I could instruct them. "So, Doc, what are we supposed to be doing?" one of the women interrupted. From their interactions, this one seemed to be Teta. "I was about to tell you," I said, flaring my nostrils and huffing. "You're Teta? Clan name?" "Teta Vardry," she said monotone. I clopped a hoof. "All right. You won't do much. All you have to do is stand in this chamber while Dr. Aleister converses in the other room. If you feel any discomfort, let us know, and if you feel the need to leave, you can find the paramedics ready outside." The group stiffened at my instructions, and they all responded with their own hoof clops. I turned to the blast doors on the observation window and opened them. Dr. Aleister was already on the other side, swiveling in her chair. As she glanced back at me, she lingered the eye contact for a moment. She'd expressed concern about my being here because of what happened before, but I was firm that I wanted to observe my reaction again, and some bit of me felt it would be unfair to the other Impey Karen if they would experience that while I was hiding away. I extended a forelimb and jutted out one of my fingers near where human thumbs would have been placed. She returned with her own thumb up. She stood from her chair and approached the covered containment chamber in the middle, inputting the commands to retract the covering. This would be the first they'd be seeing of the dust. The particles of black were bunched up, still floating, but with no signs of consciousness. No noticeable adverse reactions. I noted that down, and so did the recorder-observer drones. I turned to the doctor inside the chamber and dipped my head. "Next steps." She inputted the commands to wake the dust. The black mass began roiling and spinning in on itself. "Emily Lilt awakens this few." The voice came as a boom, and the pulse hit me again. I clenched my teeth, but it very much was not as adverse as the first time. One of the Impey Karen immediately darted out of the observation room. The rest were visibly shaken. One of the men raised a hand. "Oodd discomfort," he managed to squeak out. The drones beside me were silent, but they were making notes and calculations. As I cut myself off with a growl, the sensation not having fully left me. As a consolation, it does get better. Once again, if you need to leave, please go ahead. The man that asked the question seemed to hesitantly glance at the door. "Luz, we're here together," Teta said to him, patting down her fur. "If you stay, we're here for you." He took a few breaths and jerked a NPD at her. After a moment of each volunteer looking at each other, they looked to me, and I dipped my head. "All right, we will continue, then." I turned to the doctor inside the chamber and put out one of the digits on my forelimb to proceed. The doctor replied with a thumb up and a flash of teeth. "Did you manage to synthesize the knowledge I gave you earlier?" she asked. "This few was in sleep, but we's knowledge has churned feeling, but knowledge continues straining." The voice came as a boom again. The digits on my forelimbs curled and stabbed at my paw. The discomfort was subsiding every time it spoke, but it was still there, and it was still palpable. "When you say churn, that means you're processing new information, thinking. Churning knowledge is more intent, more time and power to use. That we has less breadth means we has less power, and in turn we's knowledge expands slower. So it's more like, contemplating." She put a hand on her chin. "Contemplating. Emily Lilt provides knowledge." This entire exchange, my digits were digging deeper into my claws. Asterisk provides knowledge, please," Emily said. The gestalt gave a buzz. Somehow, this new sound was worse than the sound before, much worse. I backstepped a hoof, my fur stood on end. I clenched my digits. I heard a synthesized voice beside me, but didn't hear what it said. "Doctor," I heard it again. I turned, teeth grinding. "A volunteer has collapsed." The voice was one of the recorder observer drones. Adrenal responses flooded my throat, and I rushed over to the control panel in front of me and inputted the stasis command. This fuse particles immediately went still before slowly forming into a cloud, no longer writhing. I turned to see the guards were halfway to making it to the control panel, and were now walking to the unconscious Impey Karen. 3 volunteers were kneeling, paws over their ears, with one unconscious, Luz the one who spoke earlier. "What's going on? Is everyone all right?" Dr. Leister's voice came through the speakers. One of the volunteers collapsed. I let out. The pain and flight response still lingered. Had to stop the conversation. "I'm heading there now," she said as she made her way out of the chamber itself. "Medics have been notified," one of the drones said as it wheeled over to the unconscious Impey Karen. Its camera dislodged and started floating, and observing the volunteer. "Stop, robot," Teta said weakly, reaching out a forelimb. "We are taking vital signs and observing. Your friend will not be harmed." The voice came, still monotone and synthesized, before rolling away as the paramedics arrived and carried the unconscious Luz out of the chamber on a stretcher. Other medics lingered and assessed the rest of the volunteers' states. One came over to me. "I'm all right, please focus on the volunteers," I told her before she could ask. The Rusin medic nodded and helped with the others. Emily entered the room as the volunteers were ushered out. She came straight to me. "Mite, are you okay?" she asked, putting her hands on my face. Yes, I swatted them away. "I'm fine." "Sorry," she said with a lowered volume. I raised a paw and let out a quiet growl. Anyway, the new buzzing this few did seem to have had a very adverse reaction on Impey Karen. What do you suppose it was doing? I think it was thinking, like when we humans hum when we want to fill the silence while contemplating. But why would it have human-like behavior? She let out a breath. "Oof, suppose we'll have to add Gestalt behaviorists to our list of requested experts, huh?" "Logistical nightmare," I said. A quick silence immediately broken by. I'm kinda concerned about the gestalt. Having second thoughts? Understandable with how fast they learn. Ard was right. No, not that bit. I'm concerned that they were put to sleep mid-conversation, if that'll affect their mood. You are not seriously getting attached to a galactic threat, are you? I said with a backstep. Besides, from what we've learned, they have a very different perception to feeling. Yeah, I guess, she said. I'm sure they'll understand. I wasn't sure if this was the sarcasm that other people liked so much. We have data you may wish to collect, doctors. One of the drones said as it wheeled forward. I nodded. Right, you checked to lose vitals. Did you find anything? His vital signs were nominal, with the exception of an elevated heart rate and increased adrenaline. It said, he also had traces of synaptic firing that did not correspond to any bodily functions. Wait, I muttered. Phantom synapses is a symptom of psionics? Emily whispered, wide-eyed. I couldn't speak. My scientific understanding was getting unraveled right before my eyes. Rosa Caballero, Research Volunteer Waiting Room. The different species of volunteers were being grouped up, so I had to go with the other humans. The Impey Karen group was up first, so we were put in a waiting room. The lingering dread eased up when we left the observation room, but that was replaced by plain old nerves. I haven't felt nervous for a volunteer job in a while, but with what I felt before and not really knowing much about this project, that was probably why. Either way, I got acquainted with my fellow human volunteers. One of them was Ant. He seemed pretty bored. How anyone providing for collective scientific knowledge could be bored, I don't know. The other, Jesse, was a lot chattier. They started asking me if I played chess at all, and when I said I used to, they launched into a tangent on different chess openings, most of which I've never heard of. Sorry, they chuckled. I tend to get carried away. Hey, it's all good, I laughed back, a bit too forced. It's good to be excited about things. Speaking of excited about things, Ant was fully asleep on the couch. I shook my head. Damn, how can you be that bored of science? Jesse laughed. Hey, maybe he's excited too. My uncle makes sleeping his hobby, like meticulously looking at anti-grav beds, traditional soft beds, They were cut off by the door opening and Andre entering the room with the human researcher by his side. Rosa, may we talk to you? He said, waving me over. I made hesitant eye contact with Jesse before shrugging. I walked over to the both of them. Yes. You're... The researcher begun, looking through her notes. Rosa Caballero, right? Yeah, that's me, I said, kinda nervous why they wanted to talk to me. I'm Emily. Again. Listen, and feel free to say no, but we're doing a bit of, readjusting with the experiment, she said, gesturing with her holopad as she talked. It says here that you're latently psionic. We're going to be putting you in separately from the other human volunteers. Immediately nerves got me. It was good that I could still back out. But despite the situation, my curiosity was definitely not going to allow me to say no. Yes, I am, I replied, glancing at Andre for reassurance. What's the readjustment about? Emily sighed, visibly trying to gauge how much to reveal. We had a minor incident with the last group. One of the Impey Karen volunteers experienced an intense reaction, and we believe it might be connected to latent psionic abilities. Since you're psionic, we'd like to observe your interactions separately to ensure safety and gather more specific data. An intense reaction, I echoed, unease creeping into my voice. Like? Dangerous. Andre shook his head. Not dangerous. Just unexpected. We're taking precautions to understand better. I took a deep breath, the decision weighing on me. Curiosity tugged harder than fear. All right, I'll do it. Emily's face lit up with relief and appreciation. Thank you, Rosa. We really appreciate it. Follow me, please. I nodded to Jesse and Ant, who waved me off with a mix of curiosity and concern. Emily led me through a different hallway, one lined with more security and advanced scanning equipment. The atmosphere was tense, charged with an energy that set my nerves on edge. We arrived at a smaller, more isolated observation room. The blast doors were already open, revealing the containment chamber with its black, roiling mass. Emily motioned for me to stand near the observation window, while she adjusted some controls. "All right, Rosa, just relax and let us know if you feel anything unusual," she said, her voice calm but authoritative. "We're here to monitor everything closely." I nodded, taking deep breaths to steady myself. The containment chamber hummed to life, and the black particles began to move, swirling in a controlled, almost hypnotic pattern. "Emily Lilt," the booming voice of this few resonated, sending shivers down my spine. "We's knowledge expands. Provide more?" Emily glanced at me, signaling for my response. "Hello, this few. I'm Rosa. I'm here to help understand you better." The black mass seemed to shift, the particles forming vague, almost humanoid shapes before dissipating again. "Rosa, provide knowledge. We few. Feel." "Yes," I said, the word feeling strange on my tongue. "We feel. It's part of how we experience the world." "Feeling. Understanding," this few responded, the booming voice softer, almost contemplative. "We few seek knowledge. Why? Separate." I glanced at Emily, who gave a small nod. "I have psionic abilities. It means I can sense and sometimes influence thoughts and emotions. We're trying to see how that interacts with you." The black mass pulsed, the shapes within it becoming more defined, almost like faces. "Psionic. Like knowledge, but different. Rosa knowledge. Share." I closed my eyes, focusing on the sensation of my psionic abilities. It was like reaching out with an invisible hand, touching the edges of this fused presence. There was a connection, faint but unmistakable, a thread of understanding that hummed between us. "This few," I said, opening my eyes. "Can you feel this?" I extended my psionic presence, gently brushing against the mass. There was a pause, then a surge of energy that nearly knocked me off my feet. The black mass thrummed with a new intensity, the faces within it clearer, more defined. "Feeling. Yes. Understanding grows. We few learn." Emily's voice crackled over the intercom, urgent but controlled. "Rosa, are you all right?" I nodded, still reeling from the intensity of the connection. "Yes, I'm fine. This few is responsive." "This few," I continued. "You said you seek knowledge. What do you want to understand most about us?" The faces within the mass seemed to focus, a chorus of voices merging into one. "Fourth apex. We few seek understanding. Reconcile." I glanced at Emily, who was furiously taking notes. "The fourth apex," I echoed. "What is that?" "Reconcile. Assimilate without destroy. Understanding. Together." The words hit me with a force I hadn't expected. The ability to reconcile, to bring together without destruction. It was a concept so alien, yet so profound. I felt a tear slip down my cheek, the weight of this fused search for understanding pressing on me. "We can help you," I said, my voice trembling. "We can learn together." The black mass pulsed, a wave of warmth and connection washing over me. Rosa knowledge. Emily Lilt. Together. Understanding. As the session ended, Emily retracted the containment protocols, and the black mass slowly settled back into a dormant state. She entered the observation room, her face a mixture of awe and concern. "Rosa, that was incredible," she said softly. "I think we're on the verge of something monumental." I nodded, still feeling the lingering connection with this few. "Yes, but we need to be careful. There's so much more to learn, and I think this few is just as eager as we are." Emily smiled, a hopeful glint in her eyes. "We'll proceed cautiously, together." As I left the observation room, the weight of what had just transpired settled over me. This few's quest for the fourth apex, the ability to reconcile and understand, echoed in my mind. It was a journey we would take together, one step at a time, bridging the gap between destruction and unity, fear and hope. And in that journey, I felt a spark of something new, something that could change everything.